And hello, welcome to the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. So today I'm joined by Syed and Jean-Marc, and we're going to be talking about ASP.NET Core and Microsoft Identity Platform, which people are always asking about identity. So excited, as always, to see people joining from all around the world. We have Istanbul, we have Syria. It's amazing. We have this global audience. It's so fun. So welcome, Syed and Jean-Marc.
Hello. Thanks for having me here.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for hosting.
All right, we will jump straight to the community links because we've got a bunch of them as always. So let me get mine set up. And here we go. Window and there. And the links for today, I'm sharing them in the chat. And I will also share a banner. And okay, let's get going. So first of all, we have got I asked around on Twitter this time. I said, hey, do we have any recommendations? And one that came up was the Morning Brew. And you know, for people that don't know, in the .NET ecosystem, the Morning Brew has been going forever. And Chris Alcock just keeps these every day. There's a list of links, top quality stuff. So just you know, shout out to Chris, and definitely, you know, follow the Morning Brew. This is a great idea. So, all right, we have a new release of Fluent Blazor. So we had Fluent UI on the show. I don't know, time has no meaning to me anymore, but sometime last year. And it is a component library from Microsoft using web components. And so the new release of Fluent UI, this is a Blazor implementation. So Blazor wrappers has all kinds of stuff. So and it's a live thing. You can go through and test them all out. It's got all the calendars and galleries and everything. So this is an amazing component library and a wrapper to make this easy to use in Blazor. So thanks to the Blazor Fluent UI team. All right, this is neat. Map 2. I've been following all kinds of stuff with Roslyn source generators, and people are building just tons of great, amazing things with source generators. So this is an object mapper built using Roslyn source generators. And the idea is that you add this package, and then you can add this attribute, and it will build mapping classes, and it'll handle mapping between the two. So you can just do them like user to user view model. So, and of course, the great thing with the source generator is that it's compiled with your application. It builds that at compile time. So, you get all the benefits of that versus any kind of reflection-based system. So very, very cool stuff. So this is neat. Mark Rendell has been doing great stuff, especially to help. Recently, he's focused a lot on things for helping people migrate. And so this is something that I wasn't aware he was doing. He's got an implementation of the Strangler pattern where he's moving the Wingtip Toys project, which goes back a long time. I don't know how old Wingtip Toys is, but it's a very old project built on ASP.NET, on .NET Framework. And he's moving this over to Blazor Server and MVC and different things. And he's doing this live on a Twitch stream. So he's just Mark Rendell on Twitch, and he's a great coder. He's built tons of great open source stuff. So it's cool to see him releasing this and working through this. And this, just for reference, he's using the Strangler fig pattern, and this is a common pattern where if you have to migrate something, instead of trying to do a big bang migration all at once, the idea is that you kind of have a facade that works with both, and you start with most of it in legacy, and you just start implementing parts in modern, and over time you move more and more parts into the modern. And then eventually you're complete. But this allows you to do a migration over a period of time. And sometimes the migration takes, a year or more to move over. And this allows you to do that in a way that allows you to keep shipping your software. So. All right, from Kentico. So this is Sean Wright, and he's writing about a few things, but moving to Startup CS. So Kentico previously on .NET Framework and had things configured and wired up in Global ASAX. And in moving to Startup CS, he talks about the differences and how it works to migrate over. But then he also talks about structuring your Startup CS well. It's very easy to just start throwing a bunch of code into your Startup CS. And it's funny, I had a comment come in here, just startup files keep getting bigger and bigger. It's true. It's very easy to just start throwing everything in Startup CS. And so it's great to use some patterns. So extracting things out, definitely. So he talks about configure services and configure. And then he talks about maintaining it and moving things out. So you start with something as things kind of keep building up. You can use extension methods. You can use fluent patterns. So here he talks about that, extracting to extensions, and then talking more about those, and then using these fluent builders. So then you can have a very clean, readable Startup CS, and then you move those things out into separate classes. So just good to think about rather than just let things build up and get crazy over time. And it's really difficult to understand your Startup CS. Just a neat thing that James has been doing recently. So he tweeted about this, that he's been in his exception methods as he's building things for ASP.NET Core. He's putting in these things that say, hey, here's a link. And he links directly over into the docs. And I think this is a great pattern. I've had some extensions or some exceptions come up lately in development that had links to docs. I don't know if it was one from James, but I love seeing this because it's great to tell me not just what the problem is, and then I Google it and I try and hopefully find a workaround, but I find the actual docs reference. Thanks, James. Keep doing it. Okay, a couple from Gabrielle. So she's talking about Angular language service and just the experience for ASP.NET Core developers working with front end, Angular, especially in this one. So there is an Angular language service, and here she's talking about a new update for that has some updates and bug fixes for some of the top issues that people have hit. So especially if you're building Angular applications with ASP.NET Core, try this out, try the new version. And then file bugs and things if you have questions or problems. One other thing from Gabrielle is she also tweeted, and so this link is in the list of links here. It's at the bottom of the screen. But if you have feedback for her, please reply on her tweet and just let her know. We're very interested in the experience for single page application development with ASP.NET Core. And so we'd love your feedback as we're working on that. All right, we've got two more, and I'll confess, these are both kind of over my head. Syed and Jean-Marc, feel free to jump in and explain if you want. But these are identity-related things, and they both have to do with verifiable credentials. And so, yeah, so first, Damian Bowden writing about using Trinsic, which is a platform implementation for self-sovereign identity. So this whole idea of verifiable credentials, looks like there's some blockchain going in there. There's cryptographic proof of credentials, and it's a decentralized identity system. And so what he's walking through here is actually implementing that, and then being able to, the user can store information in a verifiable way, and then it can be looked up, and it's all kind of managed with this sovereign system. So this is I read through it a few times. There's definitely a lot of information in here about the different specifications that are being used. But so it's great to see this is a working implementation. And as always, then down at the end, Damien includes his links and references on how to actually do this. And the goal here, I think they need a little bit of help in drawing their cars. I think the car maybe needs a little designer touch, but other than that, this is quite amazing. So thanks, Damien. And also in the area of verifiable credentials, this is a new release, Azure AD verifiable credentials. So this is a public preview, and this is an implementation showing how to do that. And my understanding here, kind of comparing with Damien's, is this does the kind of the heavy lifting for you. So you can kind of hook into these identity providers, and it'll handle some of that. Yeah. So that's all I have for identity link, or for my community links. I'm ready to turn over to you folks.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks very much. Should we share my screen?
Let's go for it.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right. Yeah. So we're here to talk about ASP.NET Core and Microsoft Identity Platform. Let's take a kind of a quick look at the agenda here as well. So yeah, we'll do some introductions real quick. We'll kind of go over this slide, and then we'll go over, what is Microsoft Identity Platform, and Jean-Marc will come in to do a demo of the kind of current command line experience that we have. And then we'll have a Visual Studio demo, and then kind of a brief discussion on the future here. So yeah, let's go ahead and do the introductions here. So Syed Abraham Hashimi, program manager working on ASP.NET features and Visual Studio 2019. Jean-Marc?
And Jean-Marc Prieur. So I'm a program manager in the identity division, working on the developer experience, working closely with Syed, by the way, for Visual Studio, and in charge of the authentication SDKs. So the SDKs which enable you to acquire security tokens or validate security tokens for your web APIs.
All right. So yeah, we've got some really kind of great demos lined up for you today. We're going to be essentially showing kind of two different things. Jean-Marc is going to show you some things that we've already created and published, and those are available for you to use today. And that's a command line tool for how to take an ASP.NET Core project and add the Microsoft Identity Platform support into it. And he's going to be demoing that with Visual Studio 2019.9. And then after that, what we'll do is we'll go and demo the Visual Studio experience that the team is working on currently. So I'll be showing you like a private build, and then kind of showing you what's going to be the Visual Studio experience there. But there's some kind of gaps there currently, and this kind of build that I'm running here. But I'll kind of go over what those gaps are as well. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and hand it off to Jean-Marc to kind of tell us about the Microsoft Identity Platform, and then show the demo of the tool that's available today.
Okay. And before you dig in, Jean-Marc, we had several people say they couldn't hear you, that you were really quiet. So I don't know if you can get.
Is it better? Maybe it's about me forcing my voice. Maybe is it better? Do you know?
It sounds okay to me. Let's see if we get some feedback. So I guess if you can start in, and then I'll be watching to see. But yeah, definitely.
Don't
it still says okay.
Okay.
All right.
I don't know. I mean, Windows.
So there's one other thing we can actually have you try, is if you click down at the bottom where it says camera mic.
Yes.
And then when that comes up, click on audio. And
yes.
then where it says make sure that automatically adjust mic volume is clicked.
It's clicked. It is clicked.
Oh, okay. All right. I guess just yeah.
But
we'll keep an eye on it and talk loud.
It doesn't go very, very far indeed, it seems. Maybe if I do that, that's not going to be
that's quite loud then. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Okay. Sounds good.
Good. So do we want to talk about the Microsoft Identity Platform? Can you click to the next slide, please?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
No problem. That's cool. I think there might be an animation on this one, but we can do it like that. So what is the Microsoft Identity Platform? And I'm not going to do marketing or anything. That's not that, but it's just to tell you that it's something which is for developers, and ASP.NET Core, of course, developers, but also others in many languages. And there is a portal to register applications, because when you want to sign in users in applications, the application need to be known by Azure AD. So that's what the app registration does. We have libraries which enable you to get tokens and validate tokens. There are web APIs. One of the big web APIs at Microsoft, the Microsoft Graph API, but there are others like ARM. You probably know that. We have Azure AD itself, which is made of endpoints, which are certified, compliant to OpenID Connect. And that supports several type of identities for work and school accounts, so for professional or organizations. That's what we name Azure Active Directory. For personal accounts, which we name also Microsoft MSA, well, that's the nickname internally. And then also external identities like Facebook, Google, or more, LinkedIn. All that is supported. And this is based on industry standard like OAuth 2, SAML, OpenID Connect, etc. So that was for the marketing kind of slide. Now the next slide will explain more about how that applies to ASP.NET Core. And that applies to ASP.NET Core in the sense that when you create a new application with ASP.NET Core, so that's the breadth of what that can do. I don't know if you had ever seen this. Usually you do file new project in Visual Studio. That does, if you create a web API, in fact, that does .NET New Web API with the new version, Sayed, right? With the new version, that's what we do. We do .NET New Web API minus, and if you select this option, which is authentication Microsoft Identity Platform, that will do --auth single org. So that's, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but if you create a web API in Visual Studio today, and you select Microsoft Identity Platform, you'll get this path. But that's only partially the path, because this web API is also capable of calling the graph or calling a downstream web API. So that means the .NET Core templates have more. And the .NET Core templates which are supported with the Microsoft Identity Platform are also for web apps, so MVC apps or Razor Pages, but also Blazor Server, which is a kind of web app, also Blazor WebAssembly, which is a kind of single page application. That means there is JavaScript running on the page. It's not server side, but it can be, you might know that you can have a Blazor WASM -- hosted. In this case, you have a SPA, a single page application, with a hosted web API. So that combines, that's two applications really, very powerful. And Microsoft Identity Platform also supports the gRPC services. So if you do .NET New Worker 2 and Azure Function, if you do Func 2. Why the two? So I need to elaborate a little bit on that. These templates with the non-2, so for example, .NET New Web MVC, that's the templates that you will have. Ooh, I don't know what happened. That's the templates that you will have with .NET 5. If you want to use the .NET Core 3.11, then you add a 2. The difference is the ASP.NET Core team has not brought back these templates, so they are provided by Identity as the Microsoft Identity Web templates. But if you just say .NET New, .NET Core is super clever, so it will tell you install this. That's the command that you can get to install that. And for the Worker 2 and Function 2, they are only available a part of the Microsoft Identity Web templates. And finally, we talked about Azure AD. I also mentioned that you can have social identities. One of the way of doing it is with Azure AD B2C. And if you choose this -- authentication individual B2C, then you will get an application that can sign in with social identities, which is cool. Okay, so next slide, maybe. Thank you. So on top of that, ASP.NET Core leverages in these templates a library which is named Microsoft Identity Web, and which does the link between .NET Core, identity model, which validates the tokens, ASP.NET authentication. So that's what ASP.NET Core provides, and then the authentication library, which are MSAL.NET to acquire tokens, and Azure SDK, which leverages managed identity. So for people who know, I think they will appreciate this slide. For people who don't know anything, that's okay. It's just to give you an idea of this layer, Microsoft Identity Web, makes it easy for you to consume a number of technologies related to identity that you really don't want to code yourself. You don't want to write this glue code. And on top of that, that's your application. So that's a bit for the presentation of Microsoft Identity Web, and we'll see it a little bit in the demo. So that's why I will tell you, here, this is Microsoft Identity Web.
A question as you're showing this, how much of this works specifically with Azure versus how much of it can I use with, like you mentioned, some of the other, like OpenID and stuff. How many things, you know what I mean? What's the requirement of Azure in this?
So ASP.NET Core works with any OpenID Connect identity provider. The Microsoft Identity Web library is specifically made to work with Azure AD and Azure AD B2C. It replaces this old component which were named Azure AD UI and Azure AD B2C UI in .NET Core 3.1. It replaces them and it expands them. And they were pretty complicated, and you couldn't use several identity providers at the same time. So now it's possible, and it's doing way more than that. And the way more is actually the next slide, and I will be done with the slides. So Sayed, if you want to present the next slide, that's what Microsoft Identity Web and these new templates bring you. So I think it's interesting to see. With the ASP.NET Core 3.1 templates from the ASP.NET, you can create a web app that signs in user, create a protected web API, which is protected and needs to be called with security tokens, and that supports B2C. And that was it. What the new templates Microsoft Identity Web bring is the support for personal accounts, these MSA accounts, which I was mentioning. And then it does a lot of things in terms of security, which is shown by this little logo. Because in the previous templates, we were saying if you do a multi-tenant application, so an application where you can sign in users from several organizations, then you were a bit on your own to validate what was the identity provider which created the token, what we named the issuer. And that's hard work. So we've provided an implementation for that. Then the web apps and the web API can call APIs. I'll show that. You support certificate because you know that you probably know or not that when a web app or a web API calls another API, then it's not enough to say I'm this application. You need to prove it to the identity provider, to the OpenID Connect identity providers, and you do it either with a kind of password, which we name a client secret, or a certificate credential. So, and the certificate is managed for you. And then I won't enter in the details, and that would deserve something bigger than that, but you have all kinds of security things, plus the support of gRPC and Azure Function. Okay, so I'm going now to move to the demo, I think.
All right.
Okay, and which means that I will move that here. And tell me, can you see my screen?
Sorry, that's me.
No
add the screen. There it is. Okay.
So I've done 5 new projects in Visual Studio. I'm going to create a web API, and then we'll see what the web API is. A web API, so you know it's you know what a web API is. It's a service. So I'm going to go there, and I'm going to name it my first web API. I don't know if this is very big.
It's pretty small.
I zoomed in a bit. So
there it goes.
My first web API, I'm not going to place the solution and the project in the same. You'll see why, because I'm going to create another project after. So I press next. I'm going to use .NET 5, so the Microsoft Identity Web templates I was mentioning, the templates using Microsoft Identity Web, and I'm going to say I want to add authentication with the Microsoft Identity platform. So I say create, so I select create, and of course Visual Studio under the scene is doing this .NET new, // auth single org, it doesn't call graph or anything at that stage. Sayed, I think that's something you will offer you soon, I hope. That the fact that we are going to be able to say, I want to call the graph.
Yeah,
Microsoft Graph.
Yeah, we'll see that.
We'll see that. Cool. So it's creating the project. Well, a bit long because my PC is tired today. It's the end of the European day. So tired. A bit like me. But well, anyway, it's the PC. It's not Visual Studio maybe. But the PC is really, really slow.
Oh man, time to get a new machine, Jean-Marc. For sure.
Well, a question while this is going, we had somebody ask about resources, and I think they're asking about these slides here. So let me grab these real quick. I'll add them to the community links. But so this is https ak.ms. Oh, and your thing came up. .NET template. Oh gosh, I don't know. Maybe Syed, you can chat those over to me or something.
Oh yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. Actually, Visual Studio doesn't reappear.
Okay.
It does reappear. It does.
There it is.
Okay.
Suspense.
Good. So this is my first web API. Oof. Okay. So I can go ahead, right? I can. So
yeah.
So we get here. You've seen this experience. It says with add authentication with the Microsoft Identity Platform, which has added that, and we'll have a look at other parts, which are, for example, in startup.cs. Oh wow, this is so bad. I don't know if let me try to minimize maybe this. I'm trying to minimize the other window where because it seems that my PC is dying. Okay, so in the startup.cs, we say this template has said add authentication. That means for a web API, and find information. So we want to add a web API with the Microsoft Identity Platform. So that's what
Jean-Marc, I'm sorry, but people are having trouble hearing you again. I don't know if you can demo and hold your mic.
I will. Yeah, that's I followed the instruction, but usually I use just the thing, and that works better than listening. But anyway, I was too obedient.
If you want to try, we can switch over to your build. But this is fine. I
think this is fine. Let's not waste too much time. So this section, Azure AD, is the configuration section, and that says what is the identity provider, what's going to generate the security token, and then this identity partner provider is capable of managing several organizations like Microsoft.com or yourorganization.net, and then that will be what we name the tenant, and we'll have an application. And in terms of the controller, the controller is the normal ASP.NET Core template, which gets you back some weather forecast, except that it's protected. It's protected because you have this authorized attribute. That's the key of identity. And a little additional thing is the token that you create will need to have a scope. A scope is when you access, for example, some APIs, you would say, they are accessible only as read-only for certain users or certain apps, or as a read-write. Here, that's access the API as a user. We have only one scope here. So let's go back to this file, and previous version of Visual Studio the previous version of Visual Studio before just 16.9. Used to fill in that for you, but you could do, that was good and not as good, because that could not support as many identities as this one does. And also it was hard from there to start calling Microsoft Graph or other APIs. So, but now we are left on our own, except that you have this link here. So, and if I click on the link, that will open this documentation that Syed wrote, which explains that you have a new tool, which is named MS Identity App Sync, and you install it as a .NET global tool. And when you have installed it, then it will be able to do even more than what you used to do. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So I've installed this tool, and I've done a little bit more. I've also installed it in Visual Studio as an external tool, which was shown by this link. So basically, you had an external tool, which is this .NET tool. And in my case, I will create the application in a specific tenant, the test tenant, to avoid creating it in the Microsoft tenant, which is more limited for us, Microsoft employees. So let me do that. To do that, I select the project. So I'm going to bring back these app settings because I want you to focus on what's going to happen here. And then under Tools, I will run this Microsoft Identity app sync in this test tenant. So you could specify it or so pressing OK. So what happens? What's happening is the tool detects the type of project. It says, OK, here, this is a web API. Then from there, it creates an application in the tenant and it modifies the code. That's what it does. Create an application in the tenant is something which can be excessively complicated if you do it by hand, depending on what type of application you do. And it does that. It recognizes that your code calls graph, for example. That's not the case here. Or calls a downstream web API, and it will do all the links. We are going to have a look at what really happens in a minute. So I've done. I have configured the application. I'm going to run the application now, and
why don't we maybe let's kind of explain what actually happened when you invoke that external tool.
I'm going to go. So, I'm going to explain it. I mean, I'm going to go to the portal to show that, Sayed.
Okay, yeah, right.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the part that wasn't kind of clear here was, before this presentation, Jean-Marc went into Visual Studio and created a new external tool to call the Microsoft App Sync command line tool. So what you could have done here is create your project and open a terminal and then just execute that command line tool itself. You don't necessarily have to go through and do the external tool if you don't want to, but all it's really doing is just calling this MS Identity -app -sync command line tool that's available. Yeah.
This one, and then it's in my case I have -- tenant ID because I want to be in a specific tenant, but that's all. That's all what it does. It's well explained in the documentation.
Yeah.
And I could have gone command line, but it's true. It's just that obliges. I mean, here I don't need to shift. So I'm running the web API.
And these aren't secrets that I need to store like in a secrets JSON or something like that. They're just configuration.
Okay. They are not secret at all. This one, no, this is not a secret. And anyway, I mean, no, not at all. You'll see the secret in a few minutes when we are there. So I've run the API. I mean, I've done run, and we have a Swagger. So the Swagger will say that exposes one endpoint, which is weather forecast, and that's going to be the structure of the information. Well, you know that this is the classical template. There is something I can do is try it out. So I'm going to execute, and it's going to call the API. It's calling it at the moment, except that I got a 401, an HTTP 401, which means unauthenticated. I'm not authenticated, meaning because I need to send a token for this web API to answer and to give me any answer. I need to send a security token. So we are going to send a security token. We are going to build together a web app which calls with this web API. So that's the next phase of this little demo. And I'm going to keep this this URL. So I'm going to copy it, quickly try to get a notepad. Okay, and keep it on the side. So I kept it on the side. And that's for the web API itself and why you need a security token. What happens if you don't provide them? And my web API, I'm going to, I think it's fine. Next thing we want to do is we want to go to the Azure portal. So I'm going to bring back this.
And when you can, lift your mic back up again. Sorry.
Yeah. No, perfect. Don't be sorry, and please tell me. I don't know if I could do a loop with my own.
It's funny. I hear you just fine, but people in chat don't. So
that's funny, right?
They outnumber me.
Okay, so I'm going to the Azure portal, and I'm going to go to this tenant, this special tenant. So unfortunately, I guess it will log me first in our tenant, Microsoft tenant, but I will switch tenant. And as you see, everything is slow. It's not, I mean, it's the PC. I am in Europe. So it has to cross several times the Atlantic. No, you're laughing, but it's true. So I'm going to switch directory, change the directory to go to this test provisioning tool directory where my application was created. You remember the name was my first application, so I don't care about that. I have 14 days to protect my account. I'm not going to do it now. It obliges you to do multi-factor authentication. So well, I'm not going to go into these details now. And in case I had not, wow, it really wants me to do MFA, to set up MFA. Okay, so I'm going to the Azure Active Directory. And what Sayed said, in Visual Studio, we had this tenant ID and this client ID. Where does it come from? So I'm going to go to this app registration. And without the tool, what you would have to do is to create a new app registration, try to understand how you do when this is a web API. And when you do a new app registration, that's where the client ID comes from and the directory ID. So if you go here, tenant ID start by 89 and by F6, 034 for the client ID. So that's exactly that, 89 F6 and 034. That's where it comes from. And then we are an API. So an API exposes. So there are all kinds of settings here. I'm not calling downstream APIs, so that's not populated. But I am exposing a scope. And the tool, so you remember this access as user scope that I showed you? It's there. The tool detected it. That's actually my client ID. So it creates a scope, a unique scope, which is API//my client ID, and then this scope which was proposed by the web API. So I'm copying that as well into my little notepad because we are going to use it in a minute. So that's for the web API. I think do you have any questions about the web API?
We had one question come in from Terje asking, is there an endpoint to get just a JOT token, for example, for testing with Postman?
Yes, but the thing is, it's complicated. You usually have to use username, password for Postman. So it is possible. I can interact with Terje. Nice to hear of you, Terje, by the way.
Okay.
And then the problem is if you have to do multi-factor authentication, that won't work because username password doesn't allow MFA. So that can be complicated.
Okay.
Can be complicated. But you'll see it's super easy to create a web app, and we are going to do it now. So
okay. So and just to check my knowledge, because sure, maybe somebody else will help too. So normally when I've done this in the past, I would go in, I would create a new project, and then I would go read the docs. Yes. And I would go to the portal and I would copy things and I hope I got it right. Yes. And then I would run it and maybe something's not configured and I don't know what the error is. So the idea here is this is a CLI tool that's going to provision and update my config and just kind of set it up for me.
Exactly. By looking at your code. So it's a code first approach to the app registration. It looks at your code. Did you see what your code has? You'll see that in literally 5 minutes when I create the web app. I'm going now to create the web app.
One other thing too, sometimes you don't have the correct permissions in AAD, etc. So this is, yeah.
It's super, I mean, the work that to do a web app calling a web API, we have some tutorials and there are several pages of instruction. Actually, maybe, I mean, do we have time? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, if you can keep your mic up.
I'm typing, so.
Oh yeah, right.
Okay, I will. So that's a sample. I'm bringing it. That's a sample, and so you see web app which calls your own web API. This is a multi-layered tutorial, and in the case of AAD, so that's the all the instructions you would have to do to do this app registration. Yeah. You see at the scopes, that's exactly what we in fact the tool did so far. That it will now also do the part which is the client app, which is a web app, with redirect URLs, generating client secrets, configuring to use your web API, etc. So it's a lot of it's a lot of steps, and unfortunately, as you said, you screw it up necessarily the first time you do it, unless you are super conscientious and read everything. Personally, the first time I tried, it took me without lying 2 or 3 days, and I was almost crying. I said, "Oh, why on earth did I come to Identity?"
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let's create our web app, and I'm going to use the .NET Core things that I was showing. So I'm going to open in the File Explorer, and that will be relatively quick. So and I'm going to here local. Oh, okay. My first web app, my first web API. Okay. Well, okay. I will create a new folder. Okay. I screwed up the fact of not having a subfolder. My first app. Okay. Too bad. Oh, that's okay. We will find it. We will find it. I'm going to go there. Actually, I'm going to. So I'm going to right-click and open that in a Windows terminal. So, pretty nice terminal. And now, here in this web app folder, which is empty, if I do a dir, I don't see anything. I'm going to do the .NET New web app -- of single org. So the thing that
your font's really small here. If you're just typing a little, it doesn't really matter. But
like that.
Much better. Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then I want this web app to call the web API. So to do that, I'm going to do call the web API. So minus call the API URL. Because you want to know what you call. And you remember, I copied and pasted. I copied in the notepad this URL where the service is running. So that's this. And then I'm going to say called API scopes, because when you request a token for a web API, you need to say this is this scopes. And again, you remember I copied it from the portal, so I'm pasting it here. Okay, multiple line. Okay, so my command is .NET New web app -- of single org and some information about the web API. So I'm doing that, and it's going to create the web app. Okay, done. So I will now add to my Visual Studio. So as Syed was saying, I could run the tool immediately here, MS Identity app sync. And if I wanted to create the application in my home tenant, which is the Microsoft.com tenant, that would just work. Here I want to create it in another tenant, so I would have to pass -- tenant ID. I will because I want you to see what happens, and it's easier to go back to Visual Studio and add the project. So my first web API was this. My first web app was here. You see, it's the time of now. That's what we just created. And we want to add this project, which was newly created, my first web app. So now my solution will have 2 projects, including this one. And I will show you a few subtle things. The fact that we have the same kind of things, a tenant ID, and this time we have to have a client secret, because we know that when we call a downstream web API, we need to have a client secret to authenticate the application. That's from the moment you get a token, that's what you have. Okay. In the startup.cs, that's Microsoft Identity Web again, but this time instead of web API, you have web app, and then you just specify that you call the downstream web API, and the downstream web API, it's described here. That's the 2 parameters which I have provided. And finally, in the case of the pages, if I go to index.cshtml, you see that we inject a service, the iDownstream Web API, in the regular page that you know, and we just call it like this. So we call, that's the section that maps to the section, the config file, and then you get the results. And there are even better overrides, which are strongly typed, and that would enable us to get directly the weather
Okay.
record. So now I'm going to do the magic, and we will be done. Let me get back to the app settings, the JSON. No, not this one.
All right.
The app settings.
Ah.
I'll be quick. I mean, I think we have time. So, sorry, tools. Tools, MS Identity AppSync. So same thing. You're going to see here that it recognizes that it's a web app. You're going to see that it provides the tenant ID, but also a secret. But as we know, a secret, and you asked the question, John, previously, a secret should not be here. So indeed, it's not here. So the secret will be appear in the user secrets, I would expect.
Good. And for anyone watching, a lot of people still don't know about this. User secrets, you should never be putting passwords. You should never be putting anything you don't want people to see that could accidentally get checked into source control and GitHub and all that. Put it in user secrets.
And even better in the case of authentication, use certificates. The certificates you will display here, and that's easy to do. You just go to the documentation of Microsoft Identity Web. As you were saying, I've managed to have both projects start. So let's see what happens. Normally, I don't know if you remember, in the page, we just display the result of the Web API, which is some JSON. So if everything works, I should have a web app, which will call the Web API and will display the result of the Web API. This web app will let me sign in, will let a user sign in, and then call the Web API on behalf of the signed-in users. So let's see that. Or maybe, Syed, you want to move to the thing while this is building? Well, that should not be too long, I hope. Okay. It's arriving. So that's the Web API, which is in a different window. And okay. And that's the web app. You see both. So the Web API, that's the Swagger, The web app, that's a completely new web app. Something I didn't mention, the tool is capable of picking up all the profiles, which work this way. So I think that's okay. I'm going to sign in. I'm going to sign in as, for example, this one. That will avoid some 2FA. And okay, don't care. Skip. Next.
So that error message it's showing there, that's expected, or is that?
Yeah, that's expected because I think so. Because it's not. It is not. I mean, actually, I don't know because we didn't have the error just before. Well, the web app sends me in. Okay. Oh shit! No, not that. Sorry. No, not that. I said. Okay. Sign in, then skip. That's the problem with identity. We had security. Security is against the user experience. Oh no. Okay. Well, sorry about that. I will. I don't want to spend too much time. Well, what you will see is the web app calls the Web API and displays. Well, I hope so. Admin again. Skip. Okay, this time. Okay, that's a new application. It asks me to consent for this web API to call the web app, to call the web API, and also read my my information as a user. And I am tenant admin, so I could consent for all the application, or let each user consent. After all, each user can decide if the application is going to access their data, like, for example, in that case, the weather. So that's what happened. It signed me in. It called the web API, and which is here, and it has displayed the value, which is here. And that's it. That's the demo.
Ah.
So it has never been as easy to create a web app calling a web API protected by Microsoft Identity Platform. But of course, that's still some manual steps. So Syed, what's the future?
Okay, great. Yeah, let's switch over to my screen, John. Let me just do a kind of a recap real quick.
Yeah, I think because some people were confused in the chat, and I think part of what you're showing also as part of this is here's how hard it was to do before, or here's where you would have written the code, and then you're also showing the simple version. But it's kind of easy to hear both of those and think, wow, there's a lot going on. But actually, if you just went through and scaffolded things out and used a tool, it would set a lot up for you that you wouldn't have to write that code.
And John, is it possible to share the demo script? I have published it on GitHub for
sure. There's a private chat thing over on the right. You can send that to me.
Okay, and we can share it with everybody.
Yeah, and let me just kind of recap a couple things here. So what Jean-Marc was showing was this MS Identity -app-sync command, right? So to get that one installed, and this is at that AKA link that John pasted in the chat previously, you'll just .NET tool install it. It'll be available as a part of your tools. And then from there, you can then go and execute this, right? So the flow is create your project with single org, and then call the MS Identity app sync. And then we can see that it's going to detect that, hey, this is a web app or a web API or whatever you got. It'll create some objects in Azure, and then it will configure your project to use those objects in Azure, right? And this is incredibly difficult to do it on your own without any tooling, and it's pages and pages of documentation. Okay, now let's switch over to, and everything that Jean-Marc showed is available for you to use today. So let me show you some stuff which is not available to use, and this is the stuff that we're working on, and it will be coming in the 2019 .10 release. So I will go and create a new project here. Just going to pick ASP.NET Core Web App here. So I'm going to pick that, and just the standard project name and location. Just going to go with the defaults here. Now for authentication type, we get a new kind of option here. Let me zoom in on this a little bit for everybody. We get a new option here for Microsoft Identity Platform. So I'm going to go ahead and pick this. Let me zoom out. What happened here? Just 1 second. Sorry about that. Why does that always open up? So yeah, now
3.1 project, Syed, that will be even.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, I'm just gonna go with just gonna go with what I got here for now. So yeah, Microsoft Identity Platform, and this will work for either 3.1 or 5.0. Doesn't really matter. Let me go ahead and create this project. So now with this current version. This is also the same with 16.9. We don't go the whole entire process. We don't go the whole way of actually creating the project and then tying it up with Azure and all that sort of stuff. We're kind of left here. But what you'll do is, by the time we release this for 2019.10, everything will be kind of wired together, and then everything will open up automatically. So let me manually go to connected services here. And this is the part that, after you create your project, we'll go ahead and open these things up for you automatically. But with this particular build, we haven't implemented that yet. So I just click the plus button here for service dependencies. I'm going to go ahead and pick Microsoft Identity Platform. And here we can see I'm signed in with some certain accounts here. So I've got a few different accounts here. I'm going to go ahead and pick this particular one that I have. And there's a tenant selector. So if that account had several different tenants, you would be able to select the tenant that you wanted to configure this application with. And then here we can see just a table of the applications that this account owns. And by the time we release 2019.10, we'll have a little plus button here so you can create a new Azure application. But we're kind of currently limited to picking, existing apps with this kind of current version that I have today. So let me go ahead and pick Web App 8. Go ahead and click next here. So here we can see those options for, do I want to call the Microsoft Graph, or do I want to add permissions to another web API here? For this demo, I'm just really kind of interested in the authentication parts of it. So we'll just go ahead and skip that. Go ahead and do a next here. And here's a summary of the changes here. So, what's going to happen is it's going to go and look into Azure, and and figure out all the endpoint information, those IDs and the tenant URL. And then it's going to plug that into app settings.json. And one thing that we're not showing here is we will actually update the Azure application to have an additional 1 or 2 redirect URIs in order to call back to this application that I'm running today. All right, let me go ahead and click finish here. And, you know, I forgot to, when I opened up the app settings.json, there were just placeholder values like all 1s or all 2s. We'll flip back to that to see what the result is. All right, so we can see now this has completed its work. Let's go ahead and flip back to the app settings.json. We can see everything's been plugged in here. So I got the client ID, and, you know, this was pulled from Azure. We got the tenant ID also pulled from Azure, and then the domain as well. Let's go ahead and do a control F5 on this one.
While you're doing that, there's a question that came up, and I'll try to help answer here too, because I make sure I understand. But Mir said VS is a powerful tool, but with .NET Core being open source and cross-platform, it would be great if the sessions with DevTools, VS Code, and .NET CLI. But to be clear here, what Jean-Marc showed was doing all this stuff using the CLI. So this is using, right? This is built using that cross-platform CLI tool.
That's right. Absolutely.
But what you're showing is, this is a layer on top of that if you're using Visual Studio that you can just click through instead of typing the stuff in the CLI.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. So we've got 2 kind of things here. We've got a CLI tool, and then we've got the Visual Studio support that's built on top of that, right? So let's say if you're using Visual Studio Code, or if you're using Notepad, you know, you can use the CLI tool. But if you're using, you know, Visual Studio on Windows, then you'll be able to do everything right inside the IDE itself. And, you know, we realize, you know, some developers like command line, some developers like IDE. So we're just providing that value in both places here. All right. So I created my, so I went ahead and control F5. Let me go ahead and sign in with this account here that I've got. Let me paste in my password. All right. So now we can see I have successfully signed in here with my kind of with this kind of this account here, basically. All right, let me go ahead and close out of that. All right, so now this was, you know, without having this tooling, it's really super difficult to get this whole thing wired up. So it's really kind of incredible that we're able to actually do this. I think we're kind of running short on time. No, John?
Yeah, a little short. I don't know if there's anything. I mean, we should wrap up in the next few minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about a little bit about the future here. And, you know, I want to make sure that it's kind of clear here as well. You know, the CLI tool and the Visual Studio experience, they're both they're calling into the same exact code here, right? So whatever you do in Visual Studio, your colleagues can do on the command line with .NET commands, right? And today, what Jean-Marc showed you was the MS Identity App Sync CLI tool. So that's a CLI tool that's available for you to use today. And I definitely do encourage you to go try that out. And if you have any problems, you can either file an issue on GitHub or report a problem in Visual Studio. It doesn't really matter. But now that tool is something that we'll keep around for a small amount of time. In 16.10, we're going to come out with a new tool that's called .NET MS Identity. And that will kind of supersede the MS Identity -app-sync command here. So after 16.10 releases, you know, if you've been using that CLI tool, you're going to want to move over to the new CLI tool. And the new CLI tool is actually a fork of that tool there. So it's going to have all the capabilities that the existing tool has, plus some additional things. And then the syntax will be a little bit different. You know, the command is different, the parameter names will change, and so on and so forth. But you'll be able to achieve all the same exact things. And what I showed you here, you know, it definitely had some gaps. You know, I did file new project, and I had to manually go to connected services and then into Microsoft Identity Platform. But by the time 2019.10 comes out, when you do file new project and pick Microsoft Identity Platform, it's going to take you right into that particular Microsoft Identity provider, connected services provider there, basically. So yeah, that's the idea here. We're definitely looking for feedback on this as well. And let me bring back up the PowerPoint that's got our email addresses and how to contact us. Where is that one? All right. So yeah, so here you can reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. whatever you prefer there. But yeah, if you have any issues or suggestions about this this experience, then definitely do let us know. Very interested in hearing that. And I think we're pretty much at time here, so I'm ready to kind of close it out. Unless there's any kind of questions we should go over here, John.
I think that's probably good. The main thing is, like, yeah, as far as keeping in touch, so and keeping up to date. So you've given out your, personal contact info. Where do things get announced? Is this going to be like on the VS blog, or like where should they watch to keep up to date?
Yeah, great question. So we will definitely, I think 2 places to kind of take a look for this type of information are the .NET blog and also the Visual Studio blog. So yeah, we'll probably have information going out on both of those, I would imagine.
Okay, that's great. And then Jean-Marc also said the identity blog too. So excellent. Okay.
I would like to add one thing. Syed, you said the connected services experience will be open automatically, but if you don't choose Microsoft Identity Platform, I guess you will be able to add the code after the fact.
Yeah, that's right. So if you don't pick Microsoft Identity Platform as you're creating the project, then later on you should be able to go into connected services and then pick Microsoft Identity Platform, and then that should kind of wire it up. So yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay.
Which is a really
all right.
cool scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is really great. I can add those links also to the community links list that I shared out. And then when things ship or later on, we'll be happy to have you back on and we'll show the update. So.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, Syed and I will be back online, and very soon we've also got VS Toolbox, and we're talking about Visual Studio for Mac. So thanks for watching, and we'll be seeing some of you again very soon later.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.